Welcome to the Intangify podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Asbell, and today we have a special episode. I have a co-host, my colleague and partner, Dave Johnson, who is also an intellectual property lawyer dealing a lot with licensing and with influencers. But my guests today, and we have two, are Mr. Stephen Ekstract and Mr. Stu Seltzer. And Stephen and Stu have co-written a book that is coming out, Brand Licensing for Dummies. And they are really renowned experts in the field of licensing and are going to give us a nice education. Us lawyers are going to find out just how much we don't really know. So welcome, everybody. Glad you could all be here today. But I'd like to ask Stephen, maybe if you could give us a little bit of background about who you are, how you got into this field, what kinds of things you've done in the field of licensing.
Thank you. And it's great to be here. So my background is journalism. I've been, most of my career was in magazine publishing. And in late 1997, I was approached about starting a publication for licensing. At the time, I was working in at a mainstream entertainment publication called Hollywood Reporter, focused on just the entertainment industry in general, movies, television, video games. It was a daily entertainment trade paper. I didn't know much about licensing. I went to my first licensing expo in 1997. It was the first year it was at Jacob Javits Center, and it was quite eye-opening. And then I took a look at the other publications that were serving the licensing business at the time and realized there was a huge opportunity to launch a really great quality magazine for the licensing industry. So in February of 1998, we launched License Magazine, which is now called License Global. It was immediately embraced by the industry. We covered the entire waterfront of licensing, everything from art to brands, to sports, to entertainment, you name it, anything that can be licensed, we basically covered it. And we were super successful from the get-go. We were then acquired by a large company called Advanced Star, which owned a lot of trade shows in the business, including Licensing Expo, Brand Licensing Europe. They own Magic, the big fashion apparel trade show. And it was a phenomenal partnership because we had we had the shows as well, and we helped build the shows through the publication. So that was kind of how I got into the business, moving from sort of mainstream entertainment journalism into the licensing business.
So the licensing business for me is kind of a mystery. You know, in my practice, and I think Dave has a bit of a different practice, which he can talk about. But in my practice, you know, I see these things really only after there's already something in the works that's going to happen, right? That's when they come to me and say, "Hey, can you do a license?" Or maybe it's a license in resolution of a dispute. And that's really for me, most of my career, the ways in which I've experienced licensing. So it's almost it's eye-opening for me to know that there's a licensing expo, there's a licensing hall of fame, there's a whole licensing industry. And I'd love for you to just talk about that as an industry before we go to Stu and we get a little introduction from him.
So it's interesting. We call it an industry, but it's really a business, right? So it's not when you think about formal industries. You know, you've got fashion, you've got sports, you've got entertainment. Those are all industries. Licensing goes across all of those industries, and it's a business practice. It's actually a marketing tool, and we talk a lot about this in the book. How licensing is a marketing tool. We within the business of licensing tend to be a little lazy and call it an industry because it's just easier. It's also huge. It's about $365 billion a year in retail sales. And so we we oftentimes talk about it as an industry, but it's really a marketing tool. And I think that distinction is important, particularly for outsiders to understand. And we focus a lot on that in the book.
Okay, and can you just tell us briefly? I understand you're the founder and CEO of Ekstract Licensing Forum, and what's that?
Sure. So, in when the pandemic happened, the company that owned License Global and all the licensing expos, it's called Informa now, and it's the largest producer of trade fairs around the world. I was working as both the brand director and publisher of the magazine, and they were anticipating a $2 to $3 billion loss because they wouldn't be able to do trade fairs for about 2 years during the pandemic. So they offered anyone who wanted to take a payout to leave the company because they needed to tighten the belt. And I saw it as an opportunity for myself to create new events that I could control myself. So I left and I started what is called Extracts Licensing Summits. They're high-level education for executives in the licensing business, and we focus very much on trends that are influencing the future of licensing. So we try to look at where the future of licensing is going. As a business, licensing has always been kind of like a follow the leader. A lot of manufacturers, who we call licensees in the business, tend to they wait to jump on a license once after it's become super red hot, right? Because they want to ameliorate their risk. If one is able to take a look at where trends are coming from, you can get a license for a lot less money and really capture the zeitgeist of where consumers will be buying or experiencing come 2 years from now. So that's the whole idea behind Extract's licensing forums, is to help licensees and retailers to understand where is the future headed and how can they get on board new licenses before they become hard to acquire.
Yeah, I'm actually reminded of a small entrepreneurial client who approached me really just after the Barbie movie came out, and had this whole Barbie thing that she wanted to do and wanted to approach Mattel for, and it was like, we're not going to be very lucky in getting this. Is going to be very expensive and very difficult, and we're probably going to get a no. And there's sort of that sort of advice around it because of the timing. And I think, to your point, right, if you can anticipate what the trends are, where you're going, right, then you catch the wave before it's a big one. So let's turn to Stu, our guest and your co-author. You are the president of Seltzer Licensing Group and a licensing Hall of Famer. So tell us, what does it mean to be a licensing Hall of Famer, and what do you do in the Seltzer Licensing Group?
All right. Well, thank you, Matt and Dave. Great to be here. And, I'll start by giving you a quick overview of my background, just to kind of share kind of where I came from and so forth. And I'll start by saying my first job in licensing was actually in fashion. I was at Columbia Business. I was at business school and got recruited at business school to work at Yves Saint Laurent. And while there, that's where I kind of learned the licensing business, because at the time, Yves was alive and well, making dresses, couture dresses that sold for $5,000 to $10,000 each, and everything else was licensed. And I had worked on a few exciting deals, such as licensing out the brand to Luxottica for eyewear was the first deal that I really worked on. And then really worked a lot with Schwartz and Benjamin that made the shoes, and Cartier made the jewelry, and on, and really learned how this, how a design firm, Yves Saint Laurent, who was, making the dresses, how it became a tremendous global empire, because these deals would go global. We did a deal, the first deal with Luxottica was for 60 countries. Worked there for a number of years. Then the company was sold. It got recruited to work at Warner Brothers on the Batman brand. And to put it in perspective, at Yves Saint Laurent, we had about 15 licensing partners. But at Warner Brothers, just on the Batman brand, We have 450 different licensing partners. As you know, every toy, video game, trading card, lunchbox, and so forth. And really enjoyed working there for a number of years before starting this company, which is called Seltzer Licensing Group. And we focus on helping companies grow using licensing as the core strategy. And we are, been very blessed to work with some great clients for a long time. We're working with clients such as Unilever, where we manage all their ice cream licensing, from Popsicle and Breyers and Klondike, where we license in Star Wars and the Hershey brands for Breyers and so forth. We also work with Scott's Miracle Grow and the Red Cross and national parks, but we'll take a brand like Scott's, the number one brand in lawn and garden, and license that out to a lawnmower, to a garden glove, to a garden hose, because Scott's, they are just making the fertilizer and the grass food and the plant food and so forth. So that is a quick overview of me. And the other thing I'll share, just as important and kind of helped me towards the whole path to Hall of Fame and so forth, is I've been really enjoying teaching. And I've been teaching at NYU for the past 22 years, an undergrad class in someone in the marketing department, because they do see it as a marketing discipline, on brand licensing. And it's been the only class in the country, in the world, that's been around this long that has been focused solely on brand licensing. And we cover sports, entertainment, fashion, and for many years, actually, the past 10 years now, it's been a required class for anybody at NYU who's a sports management major or a sports marketing major. So that is a quick little background on where I came from. From all the teaching at NYU and speaking at different licensing expos, I've really enjoyed attending some of the legal conferences as well. I've been an attendee and a speaker at both LES and at INTA for many years. And, lately INTA has been a direct conflict with the licensing expo in Las Vegas, the largest expo in the world on licensing. It's actually been the same time, so you can't do both. But before that, I really enjoyed attending all the INTA trade shows.
Yeah, I'm regularly into, and I know before we started the recording for this episode, you and I were talking about some folks we have in common. One being Scott Thompson, who is the head of our IP department at our firm. But you mentioned Batman licensing, so I have to name drop. You know Cindy Nelson. You must know Cindy Nelson.
Of course. Yes.
So Cindy and I also go way back. She was actually at my first firm before I was. But we also do a lot of collaboration. So, another question for you is, as you mentioned, the types of things you're doing now under the Stewart Licensing Group. I'm sorry, the Seltzer Licensing Group. You dropped some bigger names, Unilever. And I think there's a large proportion of the audience listening to this that are just starting out entrepreneurs, people like you might have in your classes at NYU. Who, might be intimidated by that or overwhelmed by that. Does a new brand, does a business that envisions licensing approach a company like yours at an early stage, or are they waiting to really have a much more established brand before you'll be involved?
Two parts to that. One is, if it is, I've been doing a lot of speaking at different trade shows. And we go through an exercise, which we just did at the Licensing Expo, which is your brand ready to be licensed? Because a lot of people establish a brand and they want to license it out. But the key is, does your brand have equity? Does it have marketing support? Does it have, brand awareness? Would people buy it if it's on another product? We have a process to determine that. And so a lot of the smaller companies may not have that brand awareness that would basically help another company take the risk or convince another company that it's worth taking a risk on your brand. So that is one exercise we go through. The other is, let's say it's a startup on the other side. Let's say you have a t-shirt manufacturer, brand new company, and they want to get the Batman brand. Well, there's a process there also. And it's a bit of a risk. And, can a small new company get a big license? The answer is yes. We have seen it time and time again. And there is a risk to it because, of course, getting the right brand can make your company, but if it doesn't lead to, a shelf placement on a Walmart, or it doesn't lead to, if your systems aren't set up and so forth, we've seen some failures as well. If the brand doesn't deliver it the way everybody expected, there's some challenges. So there are some risks, but the key message is that licensing can work and is something that some new companies should consider.
So, do you sort of promptly turn away a small brand that you perceive may not be ready yet at a very early stage, or do you bring them in and help them do that evaluation to determine and help them determine if and when they'll be ready for that type of of activity?
Yes. So, in our agency, we talk to everybody. We're happy to, and we love it. And in fact, when I talk at the trade shows, we're always getting new companies to approach us and really enjoy talking to them and so forth. And that's one of the reasons we wrote this book, actually, as a great little guideline. So anybody who is considering or has some new licensing ideas, a lot of answers are in this book as far as what are the steps people have taken, what are the steps you should take, what are the risks involved? Because at the end of the day, it's really about risk. It's really about, does a licensee, if you're a brand owner, does the licensee, will that licensee take on the risk to make it and make a product and pay you the royalty and take it to market? Do they believe it's really going to sell and deliver a nice profit that would cover the royalty and everything? So it's about risk, and it's about the inventory risk, about the financial risk. And, that's really what we try to spell out in this book. So yes, we are happy to talk to everybody and love talking to everybody. And sometimes we help guide them, and we've had some great success with some smaller companies. And sometimes we'll tell them that it's too early, because again, what we're good at is finding partners to basically exploit already famous brands. But if your brand is not known, we will tell them that, hey, our expertise is not making your brand popular. But so maybe you should go back and work on your brand, make sure it's popular, make sure it succeeds, and then come to us once you have a little more traction. And that's an exercise. In fact, we have a YouTube video how-to on that to kind of evaluate your brand. Is your brand ready for licensing? That some people might want to look at and have some answers as far as, deciding, all right, is my brand ready? Should I go exhibit at a licensing expo to go find a licensee? Should I find an agent and find some licensees? And before you go through all of that, maybe go through some exercises either on YouTube or in the book that will spell it out. So that's kind of what we're here to share, is that there are some great answers now. And we've seen, again, Steve and I, and Stephen has written about this for many years, have seen some tremendous success for companies when they secure the right license.
Thanks. It sounds like the book will be really, really helpful for a lot of those businesses. And it also sounds like probably be in touch with you a lot more frequently than in the past. So glad to know that both of you are accessible in this manner, and it'll be the beginning of something. Dave, you're a lawyer in this area. You've dealt with some of these issues. I'd love to hear what responses you have to what you've heard, and if you have particular questions you want to raise.
Yeah, I deal with this both from a outbound license and an inbound license side. So, I have creators that I represent, YouTube stars that have built, massive followings. We're talking things like 10 million monthly subscribers, like 4.5 billion views, kind of, people where they've created these universes of characters over, their YouTube career. We license that out for merchandising all the time. I also work with brands that do a lot of the, inbound licensing as well. So you mentioned Barbie earlier. I was lucky to work with one of my brands and do a special collaboration with Mattel on, Barbie products around the premiere. We've worked with brands on, even product placement and licensing in, HBO shows, like, Gossip Girl. So all sorts of, licensing all over the place. I usually come in, when it is, often a little bit later in the collaboration. But every once in a while, as I'm working with clients and seeing what they're doing, to Stephen's point and Stu's point as well, I get the chance to see what trends are as well. And sometimes we can make suggestions to clients of, hey, your brand is at this point. This might be a good partner for you. Right now, we're doing a little bit of that with, fashion and beauty brands, and then, cross licensing in the sports marketing space. You have upstart sports leagues right now that, are good values as they're growing, and, they are aligned with the values of these other brands. The partnership sometimes just makes sense. Um, so it's, from my perspective, we come across this in very different ways. I mean, I think everything that I'm hearing from them sounds, what I'm used to seeing. But there's also a different world, with licensing now. When you have a lot of creators that we're working with, the majority of what we're doing is some sort of brand licensing. It's content licensing. It's licensing the reputation that they've created. And the number of collaborations that are going on between brands, between other creators. My fashion brands are working with other fashion brands on collaboration products. They're licensing things from the celebrity founders. Everything is just one set of licensing one way or another. And, to Stu's point as well, the success of it also depends on making some good choices. In my world, one of the things that we always have to do is make sure that we have an out if it looks like the relationship with the partner might be damaging to our brand. We use morality clauses. We have, termination periods that are reasonable. We also have flexible strategies. Sometimes, beauty brands that I work with will do collaborations with beauty influencers, and they'll, combine to license the name, image, and likeness of the influencer, do a special product together. Sometimes the sales pieces aren't necessarily what you expect it to be, but creativity extensions of the license terms, like, you know, we can find ways to make any partnership better.
Similarly to me, most of the time you David are later in the process, but sometimes you've had this opportunity earlier on, and it sounds like when you've done that, you've kind of evaluated that on your own. Found these opportunities, determined what the trends were, who we should approach, and creatively came up with that. I don't think of those things that quickly. I would need someone to have thrown out the ideas as to, gee, have you thought about, you know, co-branding with so-and-so or licensing with so-and-so? Why do you do it on your own?
I'm lucky that I work very closely with a lot of my clients. I'm involved with a lot of their senior leadership and their marketing teams. I get an idea of what their upcoming plans are. And, because of my practice, I work across a lot of different industries. I may have exposure to things that the client hasn't thought of. And, to me, it's kind of a value add that I can have for them. I see these things. I see the trends through all the work with every client that I'm doing. So why not share that knowledge with them? And lawyers don't really get to create all that often. So I guess, maybe a little bit I'm living vicariously through my clients, but if they love the idea, it doesn't hurt to pitch it.
I happen to know that you're pretty clued in to a lot of trends, retail, and art, and you've shared lots of information with me over the years that I was pretty clueless about. So So it makes sense to me. But I wonder, Stu, if you met Dave or you met a lawyer like Dave who was operating in this type of space on their own, is there a pitch that you make to a lawyer like that as to why they should consider working with you with your company as an example?
The first question you started to say to Dave, like, why do you do this? Or why do the clients do this? And I think I just want to take a step back and share that in our experience, there's two reasons why clients are doing licensing. And one, of course, is for the money, because they see this as a tremendous new revenue stream. And it's an amazing revenue stream because it's got very low overhead that you need to attribute to it, because a lot of these companies are sitting on very valuable intellectual property, and that can be licensed out, can be extended. And number two is some of these companies see these partnerships now as a tremendous way of boosting their own brand awareness. And they see this as almost free advertising. And it's, so many examples of that in the market. We just, one of our clients is Dove Soap, and they have a collab with Crumble Cookie. And I'm mentioning it, and this is, I don't know if this is videotape, but this is what it looks like, because in today's Wall Street Journal, they had an article on it, and they made public something that we had seen for a while, but they made public that when they did this collab between Dove Soap, they created a Dove Soap with a Crumble Cookie flavor, and it was a limited edition launch this past November. When they did that, and they published this, so it's not confidential, they had a 52% interest and buy from new people. So all of a sudden, Dove had all these new customers that came in to their brand, all because of this new partnership. So I just wanted to kind of cover that because that question had come up. Going back to your question right now is, have we used attorneys? We use attorneys all the time. We've had attorneys on staff. The contract process is very important. And it's really important to have attorneys that understand the licensing process, understand how these deals are done, and seeing firms like yours actually understand it and execute it and put these deals together is really important. I know a lot of our clients will do their own research, meaning we can share ideas. We have our process to kind of figure out who they should partner with and so forth. But a lot of these partners that we're working with have very sophisticated market research teams to determine, okay, will this work? How are we going to measure this? And really make sure that these are the right partners to move forward with. But I've always really enjoyed speaking at LES and INTA because I've always met really interesting attorneys like Dave and you, Matt, too, and Scott and many others who are really rolling up their sleeves and doing the deals themselves, which is great.
Great, thank you. I want to take it back to Stephen. In the context of the book, one of the things that I know that you address are like the different stages involved with brand licensing. And I thought maybe you could give us a quick overview of what those stages are.
Sure. So, and this has been touched upon, Stu touched upon this as well as Dave. We really try to outline how to go about it. Our publisher, Wiley, asked us to kind of write with a singular perspective from the licensee's point of view. However, the book it's great for anyone who's a licensor, licensee, or retailer. But so from a licensee, a manufacturer's perspective, how do they start with licensing? And that's really the book sort of takes you through that. It requires, number one, doing research and understanding why you would use licensing to add to your product mix or your experience or whatever it is that they're licensing for, right? Next, the research necessary to kind of find the right brands that make sense for your product or experience. And that requires, what we are very specific about is the need for them to do research, whether it's on their own or whether they hire, say, a licensing consultant who can do it for them. Oftentimes companies that are manufacturers they're very busy, focused on their particular business, right? So they don't have the bandwidth or the staff to do the research. This is why we talk a lot about using a licensing consultant. And to distinguish between an agent and a consultant, an agent is sort of a middleman who helps brands do deals with the manufacturer. A consultant helps the manufacturer to find the right licenses. And that's critical to the success of the product selling, right? It's really critical to understand if I have a product, what's the best license to use? Is it entertainment? Is it something from the sports world? Is it something from the food and beverage world? Is it something from the art world? So a licensing consultant tends to be quite experienced in knowing what's going to work for your brand. Now, interestingly, there are agents who are also consultants. For example, Stu has both a consulting business and an agency business. So, for example, on the Unilever ice cream side, he helps Unilever decide what collaborations and what brands can they bring in to help them. This is really essential to the success of making licensing work, is understanding that where your product will fit with a brand. And then we take them through the process of how to negotiate a licensing contract. And we talk a lot about using the importance of using an IP attorney. It's amazing to me, but we've seen it so many times over the years where someone will say, well, my cousin's a lawyer, I'll just get him to do the contract. No. Is your cousin's a real estate attorney? You need a specific IP attorney who has experience, right? The number of examples of people who try to shortcut the process is just astounding. And so we really spell it out in the book, what's necessary to get you to the point where you actually have a contract with a licensor, and then the steps after that to really come to market. What's your retail strategy? Do you have a retail partner? What do you understand what's involved in dealing with retail, with marketing spend, manufacturing? If you've never manufactured this product before, where are you going to manufacture it? So those are all factors. And then we talk a lot about the relationship. Once you have the relationship with the licensor, how important it is to maintain that relationship, how important it is to pay your royalties on time. These are all issues that you guys deal with on the legal side, and you see how often, it seems pretty simple, and we really try to outline it in the book, but the number of times we see these processes trying to be shortcut, and it creates issues and problems. So that's the book really kind of takes you step by step through the process to create a successful licensing program.
So one question that occurred to me as you described the licensing agents and the licensing consultants and how they help the different parties is for particularly for an entrepreneur or someone who's interested, in getting started in this, are there different fee models for how that works? Do consultants or agents work once the deal is made, or do they take an hourly rate, or does it run the gamut?
Well, first I'll share, we're a licensing agency based here in New York City. We also have an office out in LA. We're a global agency. We have 11 professionals here to help take your brand to new levels and generate new revenue sources. So our model, if you are a manufacturer and you're thinking, oh, you know what, we can boost our sales. If we, I heard this guy, Bob, he got the Batman license and he boosted his t-shirt sales with Batman license. I want to do the same. What should I do? Yes. So we absolutely work with those companies, and there's different models. There's, it could be a startup project fee. There's potentially a retainer. There's some back-end participation. It all depends really on the appetite of the manufacturer and, what their timing is like, how ready are they, what's their own process. but we have worked the gamut as far as tailoring fees that really match what our needs are for the for our clients. I'll also say, as for a brand owner, one thing I want to share with everybody as you're talking about doing licensing deals is that we tell our clients it typically takes about 18 months before you're seeing some revenue, because the time it takes to first, find your partner, which could be 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, and then that partner goes out and they potentially make the product and they sell the product, they go to a trade show and they ship the product, and then they finally, collect the money and so forth. But by that entire cycle could be 18 months. And that's why when you go to some of these trade shows, like the licensing expo that we just attended, you're seeing a lot of companies, a lot of entertainment companies, and even sport companies and other talking about events that are coming out over the next 18 months to 2 years. They're talking about, the last show they were promoting America's 250 with one of our clients in the national parks. They were talking about different holiday movies from Shrek to the next Disney Frozen movie that are coming out in 18 months, and so forth. So that's why there is a big timeline there as well.
And I'm not surprised that it runs the gamut either way in terms of structures. So you have to just deal with.
Yeah, let me add one more thing, is that we have a process, we call it doing a strategic licensing plan, that we do for many of our clients. We've done them for GE, we've done them for James Beard Foundation, for UPS, for of course all the Unilever brands. We've even done it for NBC Universal, where we go through a process to answer two questions on the brand. Number one is your brand? Number one is what categories can you extend your brand to? And number two is how much revenue should you expect? It's two simple questions. Turns out it takes about 80 pages and it's a lot of competitive analysis. We're looking at market size data. We're looking at a lot of talking to retailers. We're talking to a lot of executive interviews. It's similar to a McKinsey type report, but our clients seem to really like it because at the end, we have an exact roadmap of what categories and how much revenue we need to expect from executing these licensing deals. And a lot of our clients have, I would say almost all of our clients have started with this type of process to really, and this is kind of a flat fee type of scenario that we do for our clients, but that really provides that roadmap that then they can share with their senior executives or board members or ownership to then say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then, a lot of them will then, of course, engage us to go deliver upon what we have shown.
Really useful to know about that. And I guess could be for Stephen, Stu, Dave. You guys can fight it out as to who's going to respond. But what are some of the do's and don'ts that people need to know? What are some of the opportunities and risks that people need to know in relation to brand licensing from either direction?
Do's are what we've just discussed. It's really if you're entering into licensing, whether you're a brand that wants to get into licensing or you're a manufacturer that wants to get into licensing, it's critical that you work with professionals who understand the business. So many mistakes are made when you try to do it on your own without the knowledge base that's necessary. And whether that's, trying to acquire the license, negotiate the license, or even execute at retail. So it's critical to work with professionals who understand what they're doing. While it may seem an expensive proposition, it will actually save you a lot of money in the long run to actually work with professionals. We have an association called Licensing International, which is a trade association that assists people who are getting into licensing. They can join, and it provides a lot of resources, whether it be agents or consultants or attorneys and retailers that are very involved in licensing. But I would highly recommend, if someone's looking to get into licensing, to join the association, Licensing International, the association, and it's licensinginternational.org. They also are the organization that sponsors the trade fairs, which are global. So we have the largest one in the world takes place in Las Vegas in May. We also have one that's pan-European called Brand Licensing Europe. And in Asia, they have Licensing China, which is also the largest trade fair for the Chinese licensing market. So, I would start there. And then, I guess, Stu, do you want to add to that?
In our book, I'll go back to the book. We have a section where we have 10 tips for licensees and 10 tips for licensors. I did a seminar recently and I printed these 10 tips and handed them out to everybody. I'm thinking maybe we just put them in your show notes or something, and people can look at them. And if it sparks their interest, they can learn a lot more about each one. But this is talking about, again, for a licensor, it's about creating that strategic licensing plan. It's, as Steve was just saying, maybe join the licensing community. It's about, consider hiring an agency and so forth. For the licensees, we're talking about tips such as creating the right plan also, whether it's a licensing plan or a marketing plan. It's also about setting realistic financial expectations. It's about building those strong relationships with your licensing partners, with the retailers, with the licensing community. It's about staying compliant with all the licensing agreements, which is another whole few pages in the book, because that is an important part. It's about investing in quality legal support. We say that in the book, even before we were asked to be on this podcast. So bottom line, it's about assessing all of these risks as you go and embark on using a licensing strategy to boost your business.
Thanks, both of you. That's great. Let me send it over to Dave. And Dave, I want to see if you have some particular questions you'd like to raise for our guests, or you'd like to give some parting advice before I ask them to do the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I definitely want to echo, Steven and Stu both said it. Working with professionals is an upfront cost, but the money that you spend on prevention and doing things correctly the first time is worth 10, 20 fold down the line. Obviously everybody has to be smart about, what resources they have. But one of the things that keeps us in business, I think, Matthew, is that, some of those DIY attempts at things like licensing and the IP work, and we're here to help in that situation, but we also like being ahead of the problems and helping avoid them. I think both of you, for Stu and Steven, one of the issues that I come across for clients quite frequently is that our licensee only knows so much about licensing, and sometimes our licensor only knows so much about licensing. We do a lot with content licensing, where, we argue over the license terms because I need something sub-licensable because I have to grant a license to social media platforms, and the licensor doesn't necessarily know that. How do you deal with that from your perspective, both from the licensor and the licensee side?
So we don't really deal with in the book itself. We don't deal with that specific focus. Really focus on consumer products and experience licensing. What I think you're talking about, David, is content licensing, which obviously it's huge. It's a huge business, but it's somewhat different. The rules and regulations that are attendant with it. So, in our particular in brand licensing for Dummies, we're really focused on licensing as it refers to consumer products and experiences.
Steve, I just want to say it focuses on trademarks, about the copyrights that you're extending, not so much the trademarks. And, we cover a lot of different categories in the book, but it's really focused on trademarks, not the patents and not the copyrights as much.
from our perspective, when I'm working with brands on doing, the brand licensing for products, we may be doing collaboration with somebody else and licensing their brand. There's always a tie-in for us between not just the products that are being licensed, but the rights that have to be tied in, trademarks, copyrights, or otherwise related to the promotion and the marketing as well. One of the issues that we deal with all the time is, what happens when the relationship ends? This was part of your brand history. Are you required to completely expunge that from the websites, your social media? For us, like, yes, it is in some instances the content licensing, but it's also, addressing things like the trademark issues or even broader, consumer protection issues like endorsements, under the FTC Act and, their endorsement guidelines. Um, our licensing is, it's, this is certainly things that I come into where, we've gotten past the stage of like, are we going to get to the deal? And it's now like, how is the relationship going to evolve over time as well?
In my practice, I'd say that I regularly encounter even very sophisticated clients who come with something in mind, a little hyper focus on a particular form of intellectual property or a particular jurisdictional approach to how that intellectual property is handled. And having that sort of what I'll call it the tunnel vision is something that, I spend a lot of time trying to always think broader, think more widely. How's that gonna play out in this other country? If that's a place of interest, or gee, there's a right of publicity, or there's a copyright, or there's a patent, or other things that you have to consider. Because the intellectual property rights, there's a lot of overlap, and they were created for particular purposes that don't always align perfectly with what people actually want to do. So we have to be very careful about a client is focused on a trademark or trademarks and how we address that to make sure they're thinking more widely. Don't know if anybody has a response to that.
You're absolutely right. And that's why we really put a lot of emphasis on the legal aspects and the importance of hiring an IP attorney and working with IP attorneys on the contract and on the language and understanding what's going to be involved, because it is so complex and it's so critical to the success or failure, quite frankly, of that partnership. So, we really do focus quite heavily on that in the book.
I view these partnerships are almost like a marriage. And ideally, you're choosing the right partner, which is, in my opinion, one of the most important things, because if you choose the right partner, things can really work out well. If you choose the wrong partner or things don't work out well, then it's never fun. And that's when, you have potentially all types of issues. But ideally, that's why in our practice, we spend a lot of time to ensure before you get married, you're doing all that due diligence ahead of time and making sure you have the right category, the right partner, the right terms, the right territory, and all that. So it's a real win-win for everybody.
So I wanted to come to each of you and ask for parting advice. I'm not sure, Stu, if your parting advice is select the right partner category, et cetera, or if you have something different, but I'm going to come to you first.
Of course, my parting advice is to buy the book, as there's a lot of answers here. We think this will be a nice guidebook to help you on your licensing journey, which is a journey that can really boost your sales. So we have seen it, that licensing can really give a boost, and hope to see some of these listeners at the next licensing conference, perhaps, with their new ventures and so forth.
Where's the best place for them to go buy the book? Where's the best place for them to go find out more about you?
So for the book, it's available, of course, at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and many other places as well. But those two we know are great places to go. For us, you can visit us at seltzerlicensing.com. Also, we have a YouTube channel, which is at Seltzer Licensing, and you can see a lot of, visits. A lot of our information and seminars are online there, and even we do a little recap of recent trade shows.
Thank you very much. Stephen, what's the advice you would like to share with folks apart from buy the book, and how do people find more information about you?
I guess my best advice would be, if you're new to licensing, don't be intimidated by what you may think or hear about how complex it is. It's really not that difficult if you, obviously, if you read the book, you'll learn the best way to go about licensing is to work with professionals who understand the business and can help you step by step along the way to become successful in licensing. I guess, look, licensing is as I said earlier, it's a brilliant marketing tool that will help you sell more products if you have the right license. And just follow the steps necessary to do that. And I think you'll find that you'll be very successful. As far as contacting me, you can find me on entertainmentextracts.com. If you're interested in attending any of our upcoming summits, we're always planning new ones. We just finished one in Bentonville several weeks ago that we did specifically kind of focused on Walmart and how to sell to Walmart and what Walmart looks for when they look at licenses. Walmart is by far the largest global retailer of licensed products in the world. And we were very fortunate to be able to do that. I think it was quite eye-opening for everyone. And we also we had a wonderful tour of Walmart's brand new 350-acre campus, which was unbelievable. So that's my little plug for Walmart.
Dave, do you have some final remarks you'd like to share with us, some final advice, or tell us where people can find you?
One of the things that is always important as a licensor or a licensee, remember that pretty much everything can be accomplished, but it is very important to educate yourself about the process. Find yourself the right resources like, their book or, qualified professionals to help you with the process. A lot of the times it's not knowing what you don't know. That can be the problem early on for your brand. And if you can avoid that, you can have much more successful relationships. Otherwise, I'm a partner at Lucas Matthias here, and our website lucasmatthias.com. I'm available. My information is available on my page there, and I'm around speaking at various conferences from time to time.
Great, thanks so much. Well, you've been listening to the Intangify podcast, where we discuss the intangible aspects of business, and today's topic has been about brand licensing. I want to thank my guests, Stephen Ekstract, Stu Seltzer, and my co-host, Dave Johnson, for being here and sharing all those deep insights into the mysteries of the licensing industry. So thanks very much.